Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the Hopetoun Hotel, located on the corner of Fitzroy and Bourke Street, Surry Hills in New South Wales. It started out in 1839. It was called the Cockatoo Inn, and it kind of was just located on Bourke Street, sort of not far from the present location. Tooth & Co then took over early in the new century. They refurbished it in like a Federation boom style. So up until about 1979, drinking wasn't really allowed on Sundays.
How long have you been out here, mate? See, out here we call the big ones schooners and the little ones middies. That's the custom to shout when a fella shouts for you. Your shout.
Not that that kind of stopped people, but by law you weren't allowed to drink on Sundays, and so policemen often carried out inspections and the Hopetoun was regularly raided. Now, I guess, look, as time went on, the live music scene kind of turned these working men's hotels and pubs, drinking holes, to more of a kind of, mixed scene, and it sort of liberated pubs.
How do you feel?
Bugging, mate.
Nowadays, it is legendary that the Hopetoun is an enthusiastic, or was an enthusiastic, promoter of live music bands from about the 1980s. A very, fun, just unpretentious, cheap, and just an interesting place to have fun with your friends and, just watch these emerging rock and roll bands that, often went on to bigger and better things. In the 70s, Australian music was really starting to come, into its own. Bands like Buffalo, Finch, they were kind of starting to draw big crowds. And then kind of about the mid-70s, bands like Skyhooks and Sherbet just kind of skyrocketed regarding, attendances and crazy people just, sort of screaming out at performances. Now, this sort of created like an appetite for audiences who were quite happy to see Australian bands, and it was like this domino effect where Australian musicians all kind of, just came out of the woodwork. And so you could kind of just see any night of the week, any band, 6 nights a week sometimes. And I guess what helped that was that Double J at the time, they introduced a gig guide called, I think it was What's On. And it was kind of the first time that Australians really had access to bands that were playing in their town. And it gave them, just an overview of what was going on. Fast forward, about 1980, Australian music kind of went crazy. A lot of managers and agents just started to, make deals and open up suburban watering holes. Yeah, I guess it was like this music culture started, to emerge. Country bands performed there. Rockabilly acts were there on Sundays. From about 1982, they had rock and roll bands, soul bands. And then I think about 85, they started to get a lot of Australian original bands playing there. People like Paul Kelly and the Coloured Girls. And then from about 1980, I think people like Tim Friedman, the Hoodoo Gurus, You Am I, Rat Cat, The Clouds, The Falling Joys, all kinds of people started to, go to the Hopetoun. Here I am on the corner of Bourke and Fitzroy. I've come to see the location for the Hopetoun Hotel, Surry Hills, affectionately known as the Hoey. There it is there. And sadly, it's, I believe, a heritage listed building. It's been there since I think 1836. Gone through quite a few name changes, but for a lot of live music fans, it was the Hopetoun, famous, not so famous, just very passionate about their music. So here's the Hopetoun. Kind of sad actually to see it looking like that. A few scaffolding things up there, so I don't know what they're doing with it. Okay, other things that happened at the Hopetoun, lots of things happened there. Stuart Koo held his book launch here. I've got photos of bands like the Checks, the Panics. In fact, I've got one of Richard Kingsmill and Co. when they had I think it was Triple J's Album of the Year Awards held at the Hopetoun. Also, I found this really nice artwork or pieces of art from a lady called Jane Bennett. She, I think some of them were oil paintings, really nice. And I guess throughout the 80s and 90s, the Hopetoun was known for the Rock Against Work, which was just a series of gigs that promoted, I guess, that sort of half-hearted activism, together with, a lot of Australia's really good punky type acts. A lot of bands cut their teeth at the Hopetoun, the Meanies, the Hoodoo Gurus, people like that. One guy says that in 91, he said the Hopetoun was like a mecca for him and his mates. There was a whole vibe when you walked in, and there was no barrier between the band and the audience, so you couldn't have any rock pretense. And you can't just arrive on stage, you had to walk through the crowd. Very cool. I guess, even things like the Rider just being, cheap beer and cheap wine as well. The light show was very basic. There weren't really any backstage areas. I think it could only really hold about 150 people. I'd been there a few times and it was quite a small pub from my memory. So I've got memories of people who attended. David McEwen says that he remembers seeing Dubrovnik there, Vanilla Chainsaws, Hummingbirds, Crystal Sets. Alison and Jackie, they recall seeing the Flies there, amongst many other bands. Custard had their first ever gig in Sydney. I think they were a Brisbane band. Michael Simmons, he recalls Paul Kelly and quite a huge number of other bands when he used to go there with his mates, Paul Hendy and Peter Saville. In fact, Peter Saville recalls seeing Welcome Matt, Beasts of Bourbon, Lubricated Goat, Jeremy Oxley. Other bands that played were The Hitmen, Exploding White Mice, Have a Nice Day, Celibate Rifles, Killing Time, The Johnnies, Candy Harlots, Powderfinger, Tumbleweed, Caligula, Josh Pike, The Fauves, Deadly Hume, Sarah Blasco, The Whitlams, lots and lots of bands.
You guys pulled a big crowd tonight. Do you think audience participation is part of the overall impact?
Yeah, pull a big one. Definitely a part of the show. Why look at your sneakers all night? Why?
One particular one is Waxworks. Yeah, Edwin Garland describes the Hopetoun as just all vibe, always packed. And I guess, the industry kind of really started to take you seriously when they saw you at the Hopetoun, because the Hopetoun just had real, street cred. Edwin Garland is an Australian musician. His band Waxworks had received a lot of interest and in fact a lot of airplay in America. Upon his return from America, Edwin felt a compilation album was a great way for more Australian bands to be exposed to international audiences. Edwin brainstormed the album of bands who were vibrant and cutting edge. The only criteria was that bands had to have just started playing at the Hopetoun Hotel. So he approached Darcy Condon, who was a key booker from 1989 to 1994, and Darcy loved the idea. The week was a huge success, Attendances were really big and, breaking the bar, the album reached great acclaim, in particular with CJM, who then distributed to the USA, reaching great audiences and over 100 radio stations. That album is called Big Hope, Little Town. From 1997, the owners of the Hopetoun have been Evangelos Patakos and Associates. I think it might have been a brother and sister duo. So yeah, and then in September 2009, the Hopetoun suddenly closed its doors and hasn't really reopened since. Now, there was apparently a sign on the door or on the window, and look, who knows the real reasons? We can only really speculate. Was it rules and regulations? Was it money? I know that the government sort of legislated to allow pubs to have in poker machines, but the Hopetoun didn't have poker machines. So I'm just wondering, did the owners just sit on, the property with that hope of, the hope value kind of going through their heads? I don't know if that's the case. If so, surely, there could have been laws in this country that, sort of penalise people for sitting on things like that for too long if they were going to develop the property. I don't know. I mean, even Tex Perkins, I've seen on a YouTube video loudly announcing that they should reopen the Hopetoun. So look, the reports did sort of say that the owners apparently told people that they'd received an accumulation of fines from police and directives from the Sydney City Council, and apparently they needed to upgrade, install sprinklers, disability toilets, a sound limiter, and security. I mean, why would you want security for such a small pub? The council seemed to disagree. Who knows? Don't know. I wanted also to mention a big shout out to all band bookers around Australia, in particular Millie Milgate. I've just been looking her up. She sounds amazing. She's just, used to be a band booker at the Hopetoun, and she's gone on to, still be involved in the music industry. Just a powerhouse. She's great. Adam Darnell, I think, was the manager at the time, and I think Lauren McHenry and maybe Tim McLean. I wasn't sure about him, but yeah, possibly. The Hopetoun is one of a kind. It's a significant venue. It's just been this tireless champion of local acts in Sydney in particular. And I don't know, maybe the people of my generation, Generation X, and younger, I guess, who kind of kept it afloat in its heyday. I don't know whether they just were too tired and had other things that they wanted to do in life and wanted to leave, things to the younger generation. I don't know why the Hopetoun's not open anymore. I think money has got a lot to do with it. And let's admit it, live music doesn't really pay a lot.
We're not becoming rich doing this at the moment, so we enjoy it. Really, we do. We really enjoy it.
Any big multinationals who want to fleece us, we're very willing. Very willing.
We're sponsored by Heinz.
Heinz?
Yeah.
Not beans.
No, the soup division.
Having said that, there's quite a few in Sydney at the moment who have been going strong for all these years. In particular, the Bridge. Jen, well done. And Richard, I think it is. Fantastic. Love the Bridge. I think the Lansdowne's reopening again. Frankie's, even though that's just recently closed. And Marrickville has some beauties as well. So, look, I don't know. I don't know why the Hopetoun isn't reopening. Although I did hear a rumour that it might be reopening. So, I don't know. Fingers crossed. It's just one of those places where, at the end of the day, why do we go to pubs and see bands? Because it's fun. I've been doing it for 40 odd years. I'll never stop doing it, maybe not as frequently. Catching up with various friends and listening to wonderful musicians. I kind of like the fact that a place like the Hopetoun just kept musicians confident. They weren't always like big bands, and they were just bands that were starting out. But even if the bands didn't go on to, global domination, it gave them confidence to pursue such a wonderful, thing such as music. And I think that's why I've got a soft spot for the Hopetoun and all these little pubs around Sydney that are still there and still putting on live music. So yeah, that's my vlog on the Hopetoun. I'm sure there's lots of other interesting facts and stories that maybe I haven't mentioned. If you've got an interesting story, please write it in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find other videos here that you can, and even just for future videos, I will be visiting other forgotten sort of venues around Sydney. And yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed it. Cheers.
Hey?
Best way to get in a fight in a Sydney bar.
Sydney bar, huh?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
You know a way to get in a fight in a bar.
In a bar, huh?
Yeah, bar. Mm-hmm.
In a bar, huh? You mean a rabbit?
Yeah.
The quickest way is down Woolloomooloo.